Saelah was tempted to look under the blindfold she currently wore. They were headed to her birthday surprise, and she was eager to know what it was. She told both Suguru and Denny that she was content to wait until the day to see what they'd come up with, but the closer the day got, the more she wanted to know. Several times she'd attempted to trick both men into telling her what they were doing over the last 2 days. She'd even tried to get Denny to tell her where they were going. She thought she'd have an idea when he told the taxi driver where they were going, but her friend had been one step ahead of her and showed the driver the address before blindfolding her. The blindfold made the car ride feel like an eternity, but eventually they came to a stop and the door opened. Satoru's scent hit her, and he helped her out of the car before he then swept her into his arms and carried her bridal style. Saelah could tell they had walked into a building from the door opening and closing and the change in temperature. After a couple of minutes, Suguru and Kento's scents greeted her, along with what she assumed was Suguna's scent and flowers. Satoru set her on her feet and gently removed the blindfold. She looked around at all the beautiful flowers and found that they were in a botanical garden. It was gorgeous, and she loved flowers, so it was a great place to celebrate her birthday. "Happy birthday," they said in unison. "Thank you." She looked around. "Are we the only ones here?" she asked. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and she knew it was likely opening hours for the establishment. "I rented it out for the next couple of hours," Satoru replied. "It's just the 6 of us." "I didn't think I'd see the day that Satoru planned something normal for a birthday," Kento joked. "The day is still young," Suguru jested. "Give it time." "See if I planned anything else for the 2 of you with those attitudes," Satoru responded. Saelah turned to face him, draping her arms over his shoulder and rising onto her toes. "Thank you, Satoru. This is perfect. I love it." She kissed him, and when she went to pull away, he wrapped his arm around her waist and pulled her back flush against him, kissing her again. "You don't have to thank me, but if that's how you always want to do it, I'll take it each time," he told her with a smirk. "Thank you too, Denny," she said. "You're welcome, bestie." "Where to first?" she asked, looking around the group. "It's your day, pretty," Kento replied. "Whatever you want to see first is what we'll see." Saelah led them to the left, down one hall lined with plush plants. She took her time walking through, looking at all the plants and flowers in the section. She ensured taking pictures was okay before taking out her phone and snapping some of the blooms, and with their small group. They continued through the garden, and Saelah took several pictures of their surroundings and pictures of her in her outfits. In the tropical section of the garden, Saelah felt a bit warm, so they didn't stay there too long. Once they finished enjoying the garden, Suguru led the way outside, and they walked a couple of blocks to a parking garage. She got into the car with her outfits, Denny getting into Suguna's, and Satoru headed to their next stop. She kept her eyes out trying to figure out where they were going, but had no luck by the time they pulled into another parking garage. They walked several blocks, Suguru's arm draped over her shoulders, Kento's hand on the small of her bag, and Satoru holding her hand as he led the way to their next destination. They stopped in front of a building, and she looked up at the sign to discover it was a laser tag arcade. She smiled, excited to play. She was sure this was Denny's doing. It had been a long while since she played laser tag. The last time had been with him the summer after they graduated high school. Inside, after they were given the general rules and instructions and led to the large room that was reserved, Saelah eyed the gear in the lockers outside of it. There were 6 in red and 6 in blue, the maximum number of people that could play at a time. "How are we going to split the team?" she asked, turning to the other 5. "Men versus women," Satoru joked, and Saelah glared at him playfully. "Alphas versus Omegas," Suguna suggested with a smirk. "Screw you," Denny shot back. "We have the room for 2 hours. We can do a combination of teams," Kento said. "Then let's start with the youngest 3 versus the oldest 3, Satoru suggested. "That works for me," Saelah replied. "We'll be blue." She, Kento, and Denny went over to the blue equipment, and Kento helped her into hers before putting on his own. Kento's scent felt heavy around her, and she breathed it in, enjoying the perfect mixture of tree sap and bergamot. Saelah ran her hands over those broad shoulders before rising onto her toes. She didn't have to say what she wanted as Kento leaned down and met her in a kiss, his hand going to rest low on her back. "If you 2 are ready to lose, we can head inside," Suguna said. Saelah pulled away from Kento and turned her attention to Suguna. "Are you one of those competitive people who talk a lot of shit and then get all broody when they lose?" she asked. "He's always broody," Satoru replied. "Well, he better be prepared to be even more broody, because he's about to lose," Denny said. "You want to bet on that, pretty boy?" Suguna asked, stepping into Denny's space. "Because I can think of something I want when I win." "Too bad you aren't going to," her friend replied. "Come on, let's get started," Saelah said, because she was sure Suguna and Denny would start going back and forth. They entered the room, the 3 of them going to the other side to their starting point and pushing the button on the wall to indicate they were ready. When the others pressed their button too, the timer counted down the first round on the large clock mounted on the wall. After 4 rounds where she'd won 2 and lost 2, they exited the room. Suguru helped her out of her equipment. He'd been on her team that last round along with Suguna. Once they had all the equipment put away, the group exited the arcade. "Next stop is dinner," Satoru informed as they headed back to the parking garage. Saelah nodded as she leaned into Kento's side. It was 6:15 and she hadn't eaten since breakfast. They started her birthday festivities early since Denny had to work that night. He hadn't been able to get the day off, but he was going in 2 hours later than usual. She tried to tell him it was okay, and they could celebrate together another time, but he'd insisted on celebrating her first birthday in a new country with her. She couldn't protest because she knew she'd be the same in November when his birthday came around. When they arrived at the restaurant and were seated, Saelah looked over the menu. Everything sounded delicious and she was having a hard time choosing. "Why don't you order for the 4 of us, little one?" Suguru suggested, and she knew he'd picked up on her internal struggle, or maybe her indecision had leaked into her scent. "Are you sure?" she asked, looking between them. "Of course, pretty. Go ahead." They placed their orders, and when it arrived, everything tasted as good as she thought it would. They ate and conversed, everyone having a couple of drinks except for Denny and Satoru. When Saelah checked the time, it was a few minutes till 8, and she told Denny as much. "Crap, I got caught up in the festivities," her friend replied. "Don't worry, I'll take you home to change and then to work," Suguru said. Denny nodded in agreement, placing some money on the table. "I'll cover dinner," he announced as they stood. "Enjoy the rest of your night, and I'll see you tomorrow," Denny told her as he pulled her up and into a hug. "Be sure to invite them in when they take you home," he whispered in her ear. The rest of them said their goodbyes, and she watched him and Suguru leave. "We have one more stop before we take you home," Kento informed as they waited on the bill. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Just a few blocks," Suguru replied. Once the bill was settled, they exited the restaurant, and Saelah enjoyed the evening air. The restaurant had been warm, a little stuffy, and she was thankful to be out in the open. They walked a few blocks until they arrived at the park, different from the other ones they had taken her to previously. They did a lap around the park in comfortable silence, and Saelah was hyper-aware of their scents. They surrounded her, and she felt almost swept up in them, as if they were calling her, and it felt relaxing. She took deep breaths of it. The way their scents blended together should have been studied, because by all standards, alpha scents should have clashed. It was almost intoxicating. After their walk, they returned to Satoru's car and headed towards her apartment. Suguru's hand rested on her thigh as he sat with her in the back seat. His attention turned out of the window, and Saelah couldn't help but take in his profile, his sharp jawline. His hair was up in a bun, and her fingers itched to take it down for some reason. She reached up, skimming her fingers along his neck and drawing his attention. Those dark eyes stared into hers, and her hand moved to his chin, cupping it as she pulled him down into a kiss. Saelah meant for it to be something brief, a quick tasting of each other's lips, but that wasn't what she got. He slipped his tongue into her mouth, and hers fell pliant, following his lead as the combined scents in the vehicle washed over her. She melted into the kiss, and her body felt almost boneless from it. That did not surprise Saelah. Suguru always kissed her as if he was trying to devour her, and she enjoyed every second of kissing each of them, because if Suguru kissed her like he was devouring her, Satoru kissed her like he was attempting to seduce her, and Kento kissed her as if he wanted to be the only thing she ever tasted. They were each addicting and had her chasing their lips when they pulled apart, the same way she found herself doing them when Suguru pulled away from the kiss. Those dark eyes were almost black and his nostrils flared. Saelah took a couple of deep breaths before biting her bottom lip and turning her attention out of the window. Recently, she found herself becoming far too turned on from simple kisses from them, but she figured it was because she hadn't dated in a while, and they kissed her like she was the only person they ever wanted to kiss. The rest of the ride to her apartment was filled with their heavy scents in the air, and when they arrived, she took a deep breath of the night air as they walked her to the front door. "Would you like to come in?" she asked. "We could watch a movie." "Sure, little Alpha." She led them inside, realizing belatedly that she didn't have slippers for them to wear. She made a mental note to remedy that, especially since they had some for her when she'd visited them. They removed their shoes, and she led them over to the couch, but stopped as a box on the kitchen counter caught her attention. It hadn't been there when she and Denny left that afternoon. Saelah walked over to it and found a note on top of it. "Enjoy it with your alphas." She opened the box and found a small cake inside with strawberries on top and a few candles already in it, ready to be lit. She couldn't help but smile, understanding why Denny had told her to invite them in. Arms wrapped around her waist, and she leaned back into Kento. "We'll light the candles, you'll make a wish, and then we'll watch whatever movie you want," he told her. Saelah nodded and stepped out of his hold, going to the drawer that kept the lighter in. She handed it to Kento and then pulled down 4 cake plates. "Suguru, will you grab forks and a knife from that drawer?" she asked, gesturing to the drawer closest to where he was standing. Once everything was taken out and the candles were lit, they sang her happy birthday, Satoru singing animatedly. When they finished, she closed her eyes and made her wish before blowing the candles out. Satoru cut them slices of cake, Kento reminding the older alpha not to cut him too big a piece, and they stood at the counter to enjoy it. Suguru let her have the strawberry from the top of his slice. "We have something for you," Satoru announced. Saelah pursed her lips. "I told you didn't have to get me anything." "You said we didn't have to get you any gifts," with an S, Suguru said. "So we got you one from all of us," Kento informed. She was sure they knew that hadn't been what she meant, but she wouldn't complain because it was sweet of them. Kento pulled a small jewelry box from his pocket and handed it to her. Opening it, she found a beautiful pair of earrings inside with amethyst stones. "They're so pretty. Thank you," she said, placing the box aside to kiss all 3 of them in thanks before they finished their dessert. Cake eaten and the few dishes washed, they went into the living room, and she paused because she hadn't thought of how they would all fit on the couch. 3 of them would fit okay, but 4 would be pushing it. She didn't have to think long as Suguru pulled her down on his lap and Satoru took her feet and rested them in his, her legs draped over Kento's lap. It took her a while to choose a movie, and when she did, she got more comfortable leaning against Suguru's chest. Their scent surrounded her, and it felt right in her space, in her home. It made her feel warm and comforted. The more time she spent with them, the more she came to crave their presence, the more she wanted to seek it out. Saelah awoke the next morning in bed. She didn't remember how she got there. The last thing she recalled was listening to Satoru and Suguru debate which horror movie villain was the best, as they'd been attempting to pick a second movie. She sat up and stretched, noticing she was still in the clothes she had worn yesterday. Glancing at her nightstand, she checked the time on her phone and noticed it was almost 9. She slept longer than she normally would have. Her alarm hadn't gone off. There was a text on her phone from Kento. "You fell asleep during the movie, and we put you in bed. Text us when you wake up." She smiled at the message before texting their group chat. "Good morning. Thank you for putting me in bed and spending the day with me. One of the best birthdays I've ever had. Good morning, little one. You don't have to thank us. Good morning, little Alpha. Suguru is right. No need to thank us. We enjoy spending time with you. Good morning, pretty. We're glad you enjoyed your day. I know I just spent the entire day with you, but are you busy on Sunday?" She wanted to take them out, and she had something she wanted to give them. She'd marked them too, and she didn't want to be the only one on the receiving end. They were all off on Sunday, so she'd chosen that day since they'd all taken the previous day off to celebrate her birthday. She didn't want them to have to do that again, but also give herself a few days to get everything together. "We're all yours. Let us know what time. We can pick you up or meet you wherever you want." "Okay, I'll text you later." She put her phone aside and exited her bedroom. Denny's door was closed and it was quiet inside. She knew that he'd likely just fallen asleep. Saelah entered the bathroom, relieved her bladder, and washed her hands. She turned on the shower and did her facial routine before undressing and stepping into the shower. Once she finished, she dried off, wrapped a towel around herself, and returned to her bedroom. She moisturized and got dressed before doing her hair, detangling her natural curls and spraying them before pulling the tresses up into a bun. Saelah grabbed her phone and went into the kitchen. She took her suppressants and found she only had 2 left and would need to open the package that arrived a couple of days ago with her refill. She made breakfast and then went into the living room, sitting her plate on the table, and scrolled through her personal emails, something she only did every few days. She found an email from her father from 3 days ago. There was no subject, and the body of the message was simple: "Happy birthday. Enjoy it knowing you abandoned your father." She snorted and rolled her eyes before deleting the email. She wasn't surprised he couldn't remember the actual day of her birthday. It had been her mother who kept up with things like that when she was living, and once she passed, her father had never once remembered her birthday correctly. She also hadn't abandoned him, but he was good at spinning things to fit the narrative he wanted. Saelah turned on the television, keeping the volume low as to not wake Denny, and enjoyed her breakfast. Suguru put the finishing touches on a set of nightstands. Even with taking the previous day off to celebrate Saelah's birthday, he would still finish them a day before he expected. He was putting the last of the stain on when Haruta appeared in the doorway. "How was yesterday?" Haruta asked. "It went well. We spent the entire day together and she enjoyed everything." "When and where did you meet?" the beta asked. Suguru knew he was bored and being nosy. It was always slow on Thursdays, and he usually gave the younger man the day off because he got bored easily, and when that happened, he enjoyed talking Suguru to death. However, since he had a couple of custom orders to work on, he scheduled Haruta to come so he wouldn't have to stop what he was doing if someone came in case he fell behind from yesterday. He indulged him. He wasn't hiding his relationship with Saelah. We met outside the shop. She was walking down the sidewalk and we bumped into each other. Sounds like something out of a drama. Are you dating just to date, or with mating as an end goal? I'm past the age of dating for the hell of it. I'm courting her, with plans to mate. The bell sounded, and Haruta went to greet the customer. Suguru put the stain aside and removed his gloves. It would take the water-based stain a few hours to dry, but he'd be able to wrap up the nightstands and have a delivery pickup scheduled for tomorrow morning. He entered the main area. There was a couple browsing the shelves, and Suguru went behind the counter to grab the phone, dialed the number from the nightstand order form, then stepped into the back to make the call. He informed the client that he'd finished a day early and their order would be delivered tomorrow afternoon if they were available. After his call, he sat down to start the sketch for another custom order. Later that evening, Suguru sat on his couch doing some research on his laptop when his phone rang. He glanced at it to find it was a video call from one of his little sisters. He grabbed the phone and propped it up against the right side of the laptop screen so it didn't obscure what he was doing, and answered. "Hey," he greeted. "So lackluster," Nanako said. "You act like you don't miss us." "I don't," Suguru replied, and 2 sounds of offense could be heard before Mimiko appeared on the screen. "Don't be mean. We haven't spoken in weeks," she said. "Whose fault is that?" he asked, bringing up another article. His sisters had participated in a cultural program that kept them from coming home like they normally would have for summer break, so the last time he'd seen them in person was during the Christmas holiday, since they'd chosen to stay at school during spring vacation. "That's not the point," Nanako replied. "Anyway, we made it back to campus this morning. The program was so much fun," Mimiko announced. For the next hour and a half, they told him about every aspect of the cultural exchange program. He chimed in now and then, but when his sisters were excited about something, they could talk without breaks, one picking up where the other left off, and didn't require a response from who they were speaking to. At some point, the discussion shifted to school starting in a week and going shopping for new clothes for the semester, which was pointless to Suguru because they were required to wear uniforms. He ran a hand through his hair as he read the article on screen. He didn't know how many he'd read over during their conversation. "Nana, did you see that?" "I did, Mimi." "Oni-chan, what's that on your wrist?" Mimiko asked. His eyes shifted to the phone screen before drifting down to the courting mark on his wrist. It's a courting mark. Who would want to court you? Nanako teased. Suguru rolled his eyes at her teasing. I'm courting an alpha who wanted to mark me in return. An alpha, huh? That's different for you, Nanako replied. How long have you been courting them? Mimiko asked. A few months. It's a female alpha, right? What does she look like? Does she have social media? Nanako questioned. The two of you are nosy. Maybe, but you might as well tell us. We'll meet her during winter vacation. You're courting, which means you're serious, so I'm assuming you still will be in a few months, Mimiko pointed out. Then I guess you'll be waiting until then, he told them. Both girls squeezed their faces into the frame and pouted at him, something they seemed to always forget only worked on their dad. My answer is still the same. I don't need the two of you bugging her. I guess we can wait. You did say it's only been a few months, so I suppose you aren't at the meet the family stage, Mimiko conceded. He spoke to his sisters for a little longer before they ended the call. Suguru returned his focus solely to his research. He wanted to know all he could, to have all the information he could before bringing it up, since he knew what he was thinking was rare. He glanced at the clock sometime later and found it was after 11 o'clock. He put his laptop aside and headed into his bathroom, tossing his phone on the bed as he passed. Suguru showered and got into bed. He grabbed his phone and sent a text to Saelah. Good night, little one. Good night, love. He stared at the phone for a minute because that was the first time she called him that. He liked it. Suguru placed his phone on the charger and turned off the lamp. It didn't take long before he was drifting off to sleep.